espionage, sneaky, undercover, and top secret. These words all describe this program, and they also describe the shadowy world of spying. But what is espionage, and when did it begin? Hello, and welcome to my channel. Join me, and let's find out. The earliest report of espionage comes from ancient Greece in 448 BC. During the Peloponnesian War, the Greek historian Thucydides wrote of how the Spartans sent spies into Attica to secretly observe the Athenians. However, we have to be careful with these early examples because often the line between espionage and the actions of a diplomat are blurred. Even in the modern day, diplomats can be accused of being spies and vice versa. For example, the Soviet ambassador in America, Vladimir Reznikov, was accused of being a spy in 1941 and expelled from the country. But was he really a spy or just doing his job? Despite this difficulty, there is no doubt that the practice of sending spies into foreign countries has been around for thousands of years. In 399 BC, the playwright Euripides wrote a play called The Trojan Women, which is set during the siege of Troy. One of the characters in the play is a spy who sneaks into the city to report back to the Greeks on the Trojans' defenses. The character says, "I am a spy. I crept into the citadel by means of my swift feet, avoiding the guards and the sentries and the patrols. And I have brought you news." In the Middle Ages, espionage was often carried out by mercenaries. Mercenaries were soldiers who fought for money rather than for a king or country. They were often employed by the highest bidder, and this sometimes meant that they had to use their skills not just in battle, but also in espionage. For example, during the 100 Years' War between England and France, there were many mercenaries on both sides. Some of these men were skilled fighters, but they were also able to obtain intelligence on their enemies and pass it on to the English or French commanders. This information was often vital in planning attacks or defending against them. Spies could earn a lot of money for their services, and this led to the creation of entire organizations devoted to espionage. One of the earliest known professional espionage organizations was the British Secret Service, which was founded in 1695 by King William III. The service was created in response to the threat posed by France, and it was tasked with gathering intelligence on French activities. Spies were recruited from all walks of life, and they used a variety of methods to obtain intelligence. Some of them infiltrated French diplomatic missions, while others simply observed French troops and reported back to the Secret Service. The information that they gathered was often used to plan military operations, but it was also used to influence government policy. For example, in 1709, a British spy discovered that the French king was planning to invade England. This information allowed the British government to prepare for the invasion, and it ultimately proved to be a key factor in its failure. The Secret Service continued to operate throughout the 18th century, and it played a key role in the American Revolution. The British government feared that the Americans would receive help from France, and it sent spies into the colonies to gather intelligence. One of the most famous spies of this period was Nathan Hale, who was executed by the British for his activities. The French also had a long tradition of espionage, and their secret service was particularly active during the French Revolution. Spies were used to monitor the activity of suspected enemies of the revolution, and many people were arrested and executed on the basis of the evidence they provided. The French Secret Service was also active during the Napoleonic Wars, and Napoleon himself was a master of espionage. He used spies to gather intelligence on his enemies and to disrupt their plans. One of the most famous spies of this period was Madame de Montespan, who was employed by Napoleon to seduce and then murder the Austrian emperor's son. Espionage played a major role in both world wars. During World War I, Britain and Germany engaged in a major propaganda war. Each side tried to win over the other's public opinion, and they used every tool at their disposal to achieve this end. Spies were used to gather intelligence, but they were also used to spread disinformation. For example, in 1914, a German spy in Britain, Karl Boy, attempted to spread rumors that the British royal family was of German origin. This was designed to undermine support for the war effort, but it was unsuccessful. However, another German spy, Friedrich Rauset, had more success. He infiltrated the British Admiralty and was able to steal secret documents relating to the Dardanelles campaign. This information was used by the Germans to sink 3 British ships, and the Gallipoli campaign ended in disaster. During World War II, espionage played an even greater role. The Americans and the British had a close working relationship, and they shared intelligence regularly. This was done through a variety of means, including secret cables, hidden compartments in embassy buildings, and dead drop bags. Dead drop bags were simply bags that were left in a specific place where a spy could pick them up. They were used for delivering small items such as documents or microfilms. Sometimes the bags were left in public places, but more often they were left in private residences. For example, one American spy in France, Virginia Hall, used a dead drop bag in her home in Vichy. She was able to use this method to deliver important information about the V-2 rocket to the Americans. But espionage wasn't just about delivering physical items. Sometimes the information had to be delivered orally. This was usually done through a series of prearranged signals. For example, if a spy wanted to tell his handler that he had a new assignment, he might put a red handkerchief in his window. If the handler saw the signal, he would then contact the spy and get more details. Of course, this was risky business, and the spies had to be very careful. If they were caught, they could be executed. But the work was important, and the stakes were high. The information that these spies gathered helped to win both world wars. But it wasn't just governments that were involved in espionage. During the Cold War, the CIA and the KGB were constantly trying to outwit each other. The CIA even had a special department dedicated to finding Soviet spies within the United States. One of the most famous cases of espionage during the Cold War was the case of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. The couple were American citizens who worked as spies for the Soviet Union. They were executed in 1953 for their activities. Another famous case was that of Rudolf Abel, a Soviet spy who was captured in the United States in 1957. He was exchanged for an American pilot who had been shot down over Russia. Espionage during the Cold War was mostly conducted by professionals. People didn't just become spies because they wanted to work for their country. It was usually something that they did as a job. However, there were still some amateurs. Kim Philby was a British intelligence officer who spied for the Soviet Union. He was known as the third man factor for his ability to anticipate the actions of his enemies. George Blake was another British intelligence officer who spied for the Soviets. He was responsible for giving the Soviets the names of several hundred spies that they had placed within NATO. The end of the Cold War saw a decrease in espionage activity. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was simply less need for the CIA to spy on them. However, espionage is still going on today. The Americans, for example, are still trying to spy on North Korea, despite the lack of diplomatic relations between the two countries. The CIA even has a website dedicated to recruiting new spies. On the site, potential recruits can take a quiz to see if they have what it takes to be a spy. They can also learn about the different types of jobs available in the CIA and how to apply. So the next time you're watching a James Bond movie, remember that what you're seeing is based on real events. Espionage is a dangerous game, but it's one that has been played for centuries. From the ancient Greeks to the modern Americans, humans have always been willing to do whatever it takes to get the upper hand on their enemies. Thank you for watching. Please remember to subscribe so you won't miss out on any of our awesome videos.